I've stood guard outside that palace for 6 summers now, and people always ask me the same thing. They ask if it gets boring, standing still for hours, saying nothing, looking straight ahead while the whole world walks past with their phones up. And I tell them the truth, most days, yes, it's the most boring job in the world. But not the day I'm going to tell you about. That day I learned something I'm still chewing on years later, about people, about who you are when nobody's measuring and who you turn out to be when everything goes wrong at once. Let me set it up for you properly, because the details matter. It was the second week of July. London was having one of those heat waves that turn the whole city sticky and slow, the kind of heat that doesn't lift even after dark. The radio kept warning old folks to stay indoors. The pavements were soft. Somebody told me a postbox down near Victoria had actually started to blister its own paint, and I don't know if that's true, but on that particular morning I believed it. We had a full ceremonial duty on, big crowd expected, coaches coming in from everywhere, and of course the tourists. They never miss it, the heat or no heat. They line up against the railings hours early, kids on shoulders, ice creams melting faster than they can be eaten, everyone fighting for a spot to see the changeover. Now our uniform. People see the red tunic and the tall bearskin cap and they think it's all show. It isn't just show. That cap weighs about 1.5 pounds, sits up off your skull, and on a hot day it turns your head into a little oven. The tunic is wool, buttoned to the throat, there's no give in any of it. You're standing there in a sealed box of heat, not allowed to move, not allowed to wipe your face, not allowed to so much as shift your weight off a sore foot. So you can imagine what a heat wave does to that. There's a thing people don't always know. Guards faint. It happens not because we're soft, because the body has limits and the uniform doesn't care about your limits. A man can lock his knees standing too long and the blood pools and he drops like a felled tree. Straight down, face first sometimes. You learn not to lock your knees. You learn to keep the blood moving in tiny ways nobody can see. That morning we had a new arrival on the section, and I want to tell you about her because she's the reason for the whole story. Her name was Ava, Lance Corporal Ava Donnelly. She transferred in after a tour somewhere hot and dusty, the kind of place that doesn't make the news anymore. She was small. That's the first thing everyone said about her. Not tiny but compact, lean the way some climbers are. She didn't take up much room. She had this very flat, steady way of looking at things, like she'd already decided most of what people said to her wasn't worth getting upset about. She'd been with us about 3 weeks, long enough to know the drill, not long enough to be trusted in the eyes of certain people. And the certain person I mean is Lieutenant Reeve. Marcus Reeve, tall fella, good family, the sort who'd been told he was special his whole life and had decided to believe it. He wasn't a bad officer exactly. He was just one of those men who looks at a person once and files them away and never opens the file again to check if he got it right. He'd looked at Ava on her first morning. I was standing close enough to hear it. He didn't shout it or anything. He just said it quiet to the color sergeant, half a smile on his face, the way men say things when they think they're being funny and clever at the same time. "We'll keep an eye on her on the long days," he said. "Hot one coming, don't want her folding on us in front of the cameras, bad look." That was it, that was the whole judgment. He'd weighed her up and decided she was the weak link, the one most likely to drop, just another soldier filling a slot and not even a strong one, somebody to keep an eye on. He never asked where she'd served, never asked what she'd carried or what she'd seen or how many times she'd done a thing far harder than standing still. He saw small and he saw new and he saw a woman, and that was the file. Closed. Ava heard it too. I know she did because I watched her face when he said it and her expression didn't change 1 inch. She just kept looking ahead. But there's a stillness people get when they've decided not to react, and it's different from the stillness of not caring. I'd learn the difference about her over the next few hours. So the morning of the duty. We mustered early before the heat got vicious, but it was already warm enough that the color sergeant was going round checking everyone had drunk water. They do that on bad days, quietly. You don't want the crowd seeing the guards being nursed along, but behind the scenes there's a whole effort to keep us upright. Reeve was supervising, packing, very crisp, very sharp, enjoying himself. He liked a big crowd. He liked being the man in charge when the cameras were out. He came down the line and stopped in front of Ava. "Donnelly," he said, "you good for this? Long one today. If you feel it coming, you signal early. I don't want a scene." "I'm good, sir," she said, just that. "You're sure? Because there's no shame in it. The heat takes bigger soldiers than you." There was that little smile again. Bigger soldiers than you. He wanted everyone near to hear it. "I'm good, sir," she said again, exact same flat tone like a recording. He held her eye for a second longer than he needed to, then moved on, satisfied he'd done his bit. He genuinely thought he was being kind. That's the part that gets me, looking back. He thought he was looking after her. He had no idea he was telling a soldier she didn't belong, over and over in front of everyone on a morning when she'd need every scrap of belief she had. We took our posts. Now I want you to picture it, because the picture is everything. The forecourt, the black and gold railings. Beyond them a wall of people, maybe 10 deep, more arriving every minute, phones up, kids hoisted on shoulders, a buzz of 40 languages all at once, tour guides with little flags held high, somewhere a busker doing something with a saxophone badly, the sun coming up over the rooftops and starting, you could feel it, starting to really mean business. By 9:30 it was brutal. You stand there and you feel the sweat start at your hairline under the cap and run down inside your collar where you can't reach it. Your eyes sting. The wool holds the heat against you like a hand pressed flat on your back. And you can't move. That's the discipline of it, the whole point. The world can melt and you do not move. I was posted maybe 15 feet from Ava, angled so I could see her in the edge of my vision without turning my head. And I'll be honest, after what Reeve had said, part of me was watching her the way you watch a kettle. Waiting for it. She didn't sway, she didn't waver, she stood like the railings stood, like she'd been poured into the spot and sat there. But I noticed something the lieutenant would never have noticed because he wasn't really looking, he was just checking a box. I noticed that while the rest of us were locked dead ahead, Ava's eyes were working. Just her eyes, tiny movements. Left, right, scanning the crowd in slow, careful sweeps, the way you do when somewhere in your training a habit got burned so deep you can't switch it off. She wasn't watching the cameras, she wasn't watching the changeover. She was watching the people, all of them, one by one. And about 40 minutes in, I watched her eyes stop on something, and stay there. I didn't know what she was looking at yet. From my angle I couldn't see it. But I saw her register it, and I saw something behind her face shift just slightly, the way still water shifts when something moves underneath. That's where I'll pause for a second, because you need to understand what was about to happen, and you need to understand it slow, the way it actually unfolded. Not fast. Real things never happen as fast as people think. The heat kept climbing. Somewhere in the crowd a woman fanned herself with a guidebook. A child started crying, the bored kind of crying, and got hushed. The saxophone player gave up and the silence after him was almost loud. The ceremony rolled on, all its old clockwork, the marching and the music and the slow handover that's happened 10,000 times before. And Ava Donnelly stood as still as stone and watched one particular point in the crowd and did not blink. Here's what she'd seen. I pieced it together afterward, partly from her, partly from people in the crowd, partly from what I saw myself once it all kicked off. Down the front of the crowd, pressed right up against the railings, there was a family, parents and 3 kids. They'd come early to get the spot. The smallest of the kids was a little boy, maybe 4 years old, in a yellow t-shirt. The kind of small that gets lost in a crowd because he's below everyone's eyeline. It was hot and it was packed, and the parents had their hands full with the older 2, and they were doing what everyone does. Filming, pointing things out, caught up in the show. And the little boy in the yellow shirt was bored and hot and 4 years old, and he'd spotted a gap. There's always a gap, a place where the railings have a service opening, or where the rope line doesn't quite meet, or where a steward has stepped away for a second. Ava had clocked the gap long before she clocked the boy. That's the thing about people like her. They see the weak point in a scene before anything's even gone wrong. It's not a gift. It's a wound, really. It's what's left behind when you've been somewhere that taught you to always know where the danger is. So she'd seen the gap. And then she'd seen the boy drifting toward it, slow, the way kids drift, with that loose, wandering walk they do when no adult hand is on them. And she'd seen the parents not seeing. And beyond the gap, past the line, was the open ground where the duty was moving, where horses were, where vehicles came through, where a 4-year-old in a yellow shirt would be invisible to a driver and underfoot to an animal that weighs half a ton. Now, here is the impossible part of her position, and I need you to really sit with it, because Reeve never understood it, and that's why what she did broke him. A sentry on ceremonial duty does not break post. That is the deepest rule. You do not move, you do not leave your spot. The whole institution, hundreds of years of it, is built on the guard being a fixed point that does not bend. If a guard breaks post every time something pulls at his attention, then it's not a guard, it's just a man standing around. People shout things to make us flinch. People wave, jeer, try to make us laugh, get right up in our faces. We don't move. That's the entire point. So the rule book said, stay, hold the line, let the stewards handle the crowd. That's their job, not yours. Your job is to be the unmoving thing. And the heat said, you've been told all morning you're the weak one. The lieutenant is watching for you to fail. If you break post and you're wrong, if that boy's fine, if a parent grabs him a half second from now, then you've just proved Reeve right in front of the whole world. You've folded, you've made the scene he warned about. Career over, probably. Certainly the file stays closed forever. And then there was the other thing, the thing underneath all the rules. A small child drifting toward a place that could kill him and nobody else looking. I've thought about that moment 1,000 times, the gap between seeing it and doing something. For most people that gap is full of noise. What if I'm wrong? What will people think? Whose job is this? Am I allowed? For Ava, watching from inside that sealed box of heat and wool and discipline, I don't think the gap had any noise in it at all. I think she just did the maths the way her body had been trained to do it, faster than thought, and the maths came out one way. She moved. And I want to tell you exactly how she moved, because it's the part that left grown men speechless, and it's the part that tells you everything about who she actually was under the file Reeve had slapped on her. She didn't panic, she didn't shout, she didn't break into the kind of flailing dash that would have spooked the crowd and the horses and made the whole thing 10 times more dangerous. She broke post, yes, but she broke it the way a professional breaks a rule, cleanly, with total control. In one movement she came off her spot and her voice cut across the forecourt, and it wasn't a scream, it was a command. Loud, flat, absolute, the kind of voice that doesn't ask, the kind that has been obeyed under fire, one short shout that turned every head in 50 feet. And in the same beat she was moving low and fast across the open ground, no wasted motion, straight line, the cap somehow still dead level on her head, covering the distance to that gap before most of the crowd had even understood that something was wrong. The little boy had stepped through. He was out in the open, looking back over his shoulder for his mum with that first flicker of fear that comes when a small child realizes he's somewhere he shouldn't be. There was a vehicle moving, slow, ceremonial slow, but a vehicle, and the driver up high and forward and the boy down low and behind in exactly the place a driver cannot see. Ava got there. She didn't snatch him roughly, that's what I remember people saying after. She didn't grab him like a sack. She scooped him, turned her own body into the line between him and the danger, took him up against her chest, and pivoted all in one motion so that if anything had hit, it would have hit her wool-covered back and not him. And then she was still again, just like that, stopped dead, the boy in her arms, her body squared and solid, the danger passed behind her. The whole thing took maybe 4 seconds. The forecourt had gone dead silent. That huge buzzing crowd, all those phones, all those languages just gone quiet at once, the way a room goes quiet when something real happens in front of it. And then the boy started crying, properly now, the frightened kind, and the spell broke. And the mother was screaming and shoving through the railing gap. And there was that sound a crowd makes that's half gasp and half something warmer, that murmur that runs through hundreds of people when they've all just watched the same thing and they all know they saw something. Ava knelt, set the boy down gently on his feet, said something to him I couldn't hear, low, steadying, held his shoulders for a second till the mother reached him. And then she stood and stepped back and let the mother have her child, and the mother was sobbing and grabbing at Ava's sleeve and saying thank you, over and over in an accent I couldn't place. And Ava just gave one small nod, didn't milk it, didn't look at the cameras, didn't look round to see who'd watched. And then, and this is the part I'll never forget as long as I live, she turned and she walked back, not fast, not slow, steady, back across that open ground to the exact spot she'd come off, and she resumed her post, heels together, eyes front, still as stone, as if nothing at all had happened. As if she had not, 10 seconds earlier, broken the deepest rule of the job to do the most human thing a person can do, and then folded herself straight back into the discipline like closing a door behind her. That's control. People think control is never moving. It isn't. Control is knowing exactly when to move, doing only what's needed, and then putting yourself back together so completely that the world wonders if it imagined the whole thing. And Lieutenant Reeve had watched every second of it. I could see him from where I was. He'd been positioned near the side, supervising, the man in charge, the man who'd spent all morning warning everyone the small new woman was the one most likely to fold and make a scene. And he was standing there with his mouth slightly open and nothing coming out of it. Now, I've seen a lot of men get caught out, It usually goes one of two ways: either they get angry because being wrong feels like being attacked, or they pretend it didn't happen and bluster straight past it. For a moment I genuinely didn't know which way Reeve would go. Because technically, and there's always a technically, Ava had broken post. She'd left her ground during a ceremonial duty. There were people, the wrong kind of people, who could have written that up as a black mark no matter the reason. The rulebook doesn't have a line in it that says unless there's a 4-year-old. And I watched Reeve and I watched him work through it, and you could see it happening on his face like weather moving across a field. First the shock, the plain animal shock of seeing the exact opposite of what you predicted. He'd said she'd fold. He'd said she'd be the weak one, the one who'd make a scene. And instead she'd been the only person in a crowd of hundreds, the only one in uniform, the only one full stop to see the danger coming and to do something flawless about it. Everything he decided about her in that one closed-file glance had just been turned inside out in front of the whole world. Then something else moved across his face, slower, harder for a man like him. Shame, real shame. The kind you can't argue your way out of because you saw the truth with your own eyes and there's no one to blame for the wrongness but yourself. The duty carried on, it has to. The clockwork doesn't stop for anything. The changeover finished, the relief came on, and eventually we were stood down and marched off, all of us soaked through, the heat finally easing into a thick evening. And back inside, out of the public eye, I was close enough to see what happened between them, and it wasn't loud. It wasn't a big speech, the real ones never are. Reeve came over to where Ava was, finally out of the cap, her hair plastered flat with sweat, drinking water like she'd been 3 days in a desert. He stood in front of her, and for once that crisp, sharp, sure-of-himself manner wasn't there. He looked like a man who'd had something taken out of him. He started to say something about post-discipline, the old reflex. Donnelly, you understand a sentry does not. And then he stopped himself, mid-sentence, because even he could hear how it sounded. And he was quiet for a second, and then he said the only thing that mattered, and he said it plain. That was the right call, he said. I wouldn't have made it that clean, I'm not sure I'd have made it at all. Ava didn't gloat. I keep telling you that about her and I keep meaning it. She didn't say told you so. She didn't bring up the thing he'd said that morning, the bigger soldiers than you, though every one of us standing near was thinking about it. She just looked at him with that flat, steady look, the one that had decided long ago not to waste energy on things that didn't deserve it. And she said, I saw the gap before he reached it, sir, that's all, I was just watching. That's all, I was just watching. But that wasn't all, and Reeve knew it now, and so did everyone within earshot. Because watching is the whole thing, isn't it? The crowd was watching the ceremony. The parents were watching the show. The lieutenant had spent the morning watching her, waiting for her to fail. And the only person watching the one thing that actually mattered, a small boy drifting toward the edge of something terrible, was the soldier everyone had decided wasn't worth a second look. She hadn't been the weak link, she'd been the only one awake. Here's what I think Reeve learned that day, and what I hope you take from it too, because it's the reason I still tell this story. He learned that you cannot read a person off their size, or their newness, or the fact that they don't fill a room. He learned that the people who say the least are very often the people who see the most. And he learned that all his certainty, all that good family confidence, all that sureness about who was strong and who was weak, it was just a story he'd told himself, and the heat in the crowd and one little boy in a yellow shirt had burned it to the ground in 4 seconds flat. The boy was fine, by the way, I should tell you that, shaken but fine. The family found a steward afterward and asked could they thank the soldier properly, and they were told gently that she was back on duty and couldn't really receive thanks while on post, but that the message would be passed on. And it was. The mother had written it on the back of a tourist map. Just a few words, the handwriting all shaky. Thank you for seeing my son, we didn't see him, you did. Ava kept that map. I know because I saw it folded in her kit weeks later, soft at the creases from being looked at. As for Reeve, he changed. Not overnight, men like that never change overnight. But the swagger had a dent in it after that day that never quite buffed out, and I think it made him a better officer. He started actually asking people where they'd been before he decided what they were. He opened the file back up, you might say, and looked again. That's rarer than bravery in my experience. Plenty of people can be brave for 4 seconds. Not many can admit, in front of everyone, that they had a person completely wrong. I left the guard a while after that. Did my time, moved on like we all do. But I still come back sometimes on a summer morning and I stand in the crowd like a tourist and I watch the changeover. And I watch the guards standing there so still in all that heat, in all that wool, with the world walking past taking photos and thinking how boring it must be. And I think you have no idea who's standing inside that uniform. You have no idea what they've seen or what they'd do in 4 seconds if 4 seconds was all you gave them. We look at people and we decide, that's the thing, we look once and we decide and then we stop looking. The new one, the small one, the quiet one, just another soldier. But every now and then the world turns up the heat and a small boy wanders toward the edge and you find out the truth. The ones you dismiss are sometimes the only ones who were ever really watching.